Hi, Kyle. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm pretty good.
I'm going to go with a press release here and take the bait. You say this is new directions for you. You got to dive into. What exactly does that entail?
I guess in terms of, talking about, I made the record with a relatively recent friend from Barcelona, a guy named Raul Fernandez. They call him Raul Refri over there. And we met 3 or 4 years ago when my band was making a quickie record in Barcelona called Acoustic Dust, which was an all-acoustic record. And somebody brought Raul in to produce it, and we hit it off and decided we would try and do new music together at some point. And so he started coming to New York, and we started kicking stuff around and realized we had something really cool going. He's not a kid, but he's younger than me, and he's much more well-versed as a producer in, like, a lot of the more modern techniques that people are using, like, electronic beats and samples, things like that. So he brought a whole new complement of, like, sounds and textures and basically a whole new approach to how to put a record of music together in the studio, really utilizing the studio as a tool. And that made it really fun. My last record before this, Last Night on Earth, was the sound of a band playing live in the room, essentially, even if not completely. But it was, the band rehearsed in the room for 2 or 3 months, and then when we were ready, we hung the mics and recorded the record. And this was done so differently. Everything started with just me playing acoustic guitar, based on my demos, and when we had a structure and a form we liked, and when everything sounded good, then we started slowly building up layers, like a layer cake or something like that. Let's try this, let's try that. What if we tried a marimba? Well, no, maybe that's not working. Let's try a synthesizer, And since he's also a keyboard player, we were using a lot of keyboard sounds, and it just was a whole different kind of musical process, I think in the press release I referenced Pet Sounds and Revolver. I probably could have put Sgt. Pepper in there too, and probably a lot of other records. And, I hate to reference records that famous in a way, but, just thinking about that period when people were really utilizing the studio as part of the technical production of their album, rather than just, like I said before, just using it to hang the mics and record the stuff. This record was inspired by records like that in terms of the way, we spent almost a year in the studio just kind of tinkering and trying different things and finding the right setting for each song, and it was a super fun process. I mean, it never, it was a lot of work, but it never got old at all. It was just super exciting and fun. And as I think I also said in the press release, at the same time I was kind of going out on a new limb in terms of the lyrical content, because I brought in Jonathan Lethem to help me work on the lyrics, and so I really felt like I was challenging myself both on the lyrical side of it and on the musical side of it to do something very different than anything I'd done before. And that was, I feel like that was an experiment that really paid off. It was a really fun process. I think it led to a lot of new things, certainly lyrically with Jonathan, batting a bunch of stuff back and forth with him for months on end. I feel like it produced a lot of interesting stuff that I wouldn't have come up with on my own.
Yeah, I think that was one of the more surprising parts of learning this, because you're a poet, I've got your books. I always like what you write, so when you hear, when you hear that you're working with lyricists, it's sort of the same thing with Dylan, who did that, somewhat recently on his last few studio albums that weren't Sinatra covers. I don't know. Does that work like co-writing? You hear about co-writing in.
He wouldn't do that on his. I mean, I know he did that on Desire with Jacques Levy, but I didn't know that he did that on some recent records.
Yeah, was it Tempest, and maybe the one before that he worked with a co-lyricist on.
Really?
Those. Yeah.
I'm a huge Dylan fan, and I do not know that. That's crazy. But I was referencing stuff like that too. Again, it's like, why not reference the best, I guess? But, talk about Dylan and Jacques Levy, or, in the last few years, my interest in the Grateful Dead was revitalized by a whole bunch of different things, and one of those things was that project that the band The National did, that Day of the Dead project, where they covered like 60 Dead covers, and I did a couple things with them for that project. And one of the things that struck me hearing all of those songs that were so familiar to me from 20, 25 years ago was how amazing the songwriting was. And a big part of that was Robert Hunter's role as the lyricist. And they had a guy in the band that wasn't even on stage, that was just the lyricist, and he wrote amazing stuff for them, and especially his collaborations with Garcia were just like produced a whole bunch of real gems. And I don't know, I think my reasoning was I just didn't want to have to feel like the entire project. It's one thing when you work in a band, like with Sonic Youth for 30 years, where we were songwriting as a team in a sense. We were all contributing to every song. We were all co-writers on every song, no matter who brought in an initial idea, because many of our ideas were generated just by playing together, and so we were all involved. Working on my own, it's been really rewarding, but for this record, I just wanted to feel like not everything had to spring from the inside of my brain, in a sense. Like, I was making the music up, and then Raul was helping me sort of transform it into stuff that maybe wasn't in my initial vision of what it might be. And I kind of wanted something similar with the lyrics. I wanted a way for me to approach the lyrics where, it didn't all have to be like, personal singer-songwriter kind of lyrics. And Jonathan certainly helped with that a lot. And I don't know, I just found it really fruitful, and I found what we came up with has been really, really fun to sing as well. And I guess that's the other thing I'm really happy with about this record is, I think the real reason Raul wanted to work with me back when we did that Acoustic Dust record came about after, towards the end of those sessions in Barcelona when we were doing the vocals, and he was like, wow, I really like the way you sing. He'd heard Sonic Youth, obviously, but he was just somehow really impressed with the way I was singing, and so we knew going into this record that we were going to concentrate a lot on the vocals and on the singing and stack up harmonies and all that kind of stuff, and that's something I've always wanted to do, and I guess with Raul I found a perfect partner to really work on that stuff, someone who really appreciates that kind of music in the same way that I do. We just worked so well together on so many levels.
There's a lot of melody all over this record.
Yeah. I feel like there's always been a lot of melody in my songs, and I think in a way he's really brought it out on this record. That's I've been thinking about that recently just because I've been writing these press releases for the albums release in a month or two, and melody is really important to me, and that's kind of what I'm concentrating on these days is vocals and singing. Singing is a big part of the stage show right now, especially when I'm playing solo acoustic guitar, which I'd really never done before the last few years. It's just kind of all led to the same place, and melody's is what songs are all about, really.
And I will take a little side note, and I'll take this, my only opportunity to jump into your past for one of your songs, but the title track to New York City Ghost and Flowers is a prime example of sort of, I don't know what you'd call maybe a minimalist vocal that packs so much melody within it. Because
that vocal's almost half spoken, but it still has a kind of melodic thing going on.
Yeah. One of my favorites.
It's different with a band like Sonic Youth because we were obviously really focused on the instrumental interplay as much as we were the songwriting and the melodic elements. There's a lot of melodic melody in Sonic Youth as well, but there's also long passages of like just crazy sound stuff, and that's the kind of thing you can do with a band like that, where you're really in sync with each other. And being more on my own and working with a band in a different sense. We get to stretch out live, but I'm writing the songs on my own, so I'm really there's not really anybody to do instrumental interplay with, so I'm really focusing on the structure of the songs and the words and the melody.
Well, a nice seg here. Your melody gets a great compliment by one of the purest vocalists out there right now, is Sharon Van Etten.
Yeah.
Which we love around here. How did you guys get hooked up, and was there any? Did you seek her out specifically, or something that just sort of fell in your lap too?
I got interested in her music the last few years, as I guess everybody did. Everybody started hearing about her. I started reading about her records and checking them out and kind of liking them, and then saw her perform a couple times and really immediately realized she was an amazing singer. And I had a woman singing back up on my first solo record, Between the Times and the Tides, and I really loved the sound of a woman's voice blended with a man's voice. And so Raul and I were talking about it, and at some point I just suggested her, like out of the blue. We didn't know each other at that point. We were kind of in the same scene, but we'd never met for some reason. And I kind of cold called her out of the blue and just told her what was going on, and she was super gracious and kind of thrilled, I guess, and immediately said yes to doing it. And we initially had 2 or 3 songs that we had ideas for her to sing on, and after she came in, we just kept saying, like, let's try something on this one, let's try something on this one. And, I think she ended up singing on 6 of the 9. And before she came in, Raul had this idea that with this one song, Last Looks, he was like, let's try this song as a duet with Sharon and, give her every other verse in the song. And, at first I was a little surprised. It hadn't occurred to me to do something like that. And it was, and for a half a second, I didn't want to relinquish any of the lyrics to doing something like that. But it immediately struck me that was a super cool idea, and indeed it was. And it created something with that song in particular that is, again, like, there's a lot of this. I feel like the record is really varied, and doing this duet with Sharon on that song certainly adds something to the atmosphere of the record that's not there on any of the other songs, which is really cool. But she was a super good sport, and she's obviously an amazing singer, and she sang on a lot of different songs. We stacked up harmonies on the end of Circular and on the end of Let's Start Again and a couple other things, and it was amazing to work with her, and I think our voices blended really well.
Yeah, no, it's a perfect vocal marriage. I had you guys, I had the album on, as I was getting ready here, and another host here at the station walks in and does the whole, what is that? And the first thing he compliments is how well the two vocals work together. So
cool.
Even as a passerby.
Yeah, that's good. That's what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Those passerbys out there.
And that song, Last Looks, of course, we're playing Circular, and Last Looks, how it marries those songs together, because, the twists and turn all around this. In fact, I'll point out the title track, which is ferocious. And I'm guessing that's, was that Nels doing the lead on that?
Yeah, it's Nels doing some of the real snarly leads. Alan's doing some of the more tasty stuff, and Nels is doing a lot of the real rock leads in the middle section, in like the the wing section, as I call it.
I just love it. I love what that song's doing. It almost goes into, a 70s glam moment there for a second.
Yeah, that was the idea. It was kind of quoting a certain kind of music, and initially that song. I often write songs that seem to come out like a bit like a suite in a way, just like that have a lot of different sections and parts, and that one really fell into place very nicely. And again, Raul took that song in a direction from my original that was consistent with it, but opened it up to a bunch of new feelings and possibilities in terms of the way the rhythms are, and there's that's a song where I think there's electronic drums in some sections, and Steve Shelley in some sections, and Kid Millions in some sections, and it's like, we had people come in and play across all these tracks, and then, this is kind of goes back to what I was saying at the beginning, and then we were just kind of mixing and matching stuff, who played the choruses best, like stuff like that, where I think one chorus is one of those two guys, and the other chorus is electronic drums, and it's just funny the way that all worked. It just like everything was material towards the end of like making the song as good as we could make it, and it wasn't a question of being egotistical about like who's the drummer, who's playing the part on this song. It was just like whatever works is what we want. So it was really the studio that was determining that stuff. So like Nels came in and played on tons of stuff, and Nels is so amazing. Like everything he plays is superlative, and we didn't use it all just because in some cases it wasn't the right thing in the end for where we ended up, and and that was okay. There's Nels in a lot of places that are really effective, and that's kind of the way it was with most of the instrumentalists that came in. Like Alan played on a lot of different songs in different places and added a lot of tasty little, sort of counter melodies or things that we hadn't thought of that really made some things come alive. And Tim Lunsell plays bass on almost everything. Tim Lunsell from The Dust, and he's amazing. So that worked out really, really well. It was all kind of in service of the songs, and that was the most fun part of working in the studio like that. I've been a studio geek of one sort or another for so long, and always kind of dreamed of doing a record like this, and it was never really Sonic Youth's forte to make records like this. We were much more about playing live in the room, even if we were overdubbing lots of stuff later. It wasn't really done in the sense of this record. And so this record kind of fulfilled a lot of dreams of like working in the studio in this kind of way.
Yeah. Well, I'm obviously a fan of the whole thing.
Cool.
I love how it sounds, and I caught a clip of the new video this morning too. That looks like a lot of fun. I've got to dive into that with New Thing.
Oh yeah, that's the second released song, and and that was another fun one. It was kind of funny that Mute chose that clip as their second release, because to me, I mean, I really love that song, and yet I feel like it's the most traditional song on the record in a way, in terms of the structure and all that stuff, and then they cut out the sort of what we call the Steve Reich middle section of the song, where there's all the marimbas and overlapped vocals and stuff, and made it even more straightforward. And they were their eye on that with that release is towards the UK radio, where they don't play long songs, and they really wanted something they felt like the DJs over there would play. And I mean, I definitely love it, but it was a surprising choice for me, and that's kind of part of the fun of working with a record label where there's other people's minds on how to bring it to the public. And it was definitely a fun video to do. I thought they were going to drop that song in September when the album came out, and I thought like, oh, we've got all this time, and I'd been talking to Naomi Yang about doing the video, and then all of a sudden they said like, no, we're dropping it on July 20th or July 18th or whatever it is. And I was like, I found this out like 10 or 12 days ago, and like called her up and said like, are you up for a kamikaze video? And like we literally did the whole thing in like a couple of days. She was like, well, I'm coming down to New York this weekend, let's just do it. And like we spent the weekend shooting the stuff, and she edited it in like 3 days, and we just kind of banged it out, and it was super fun to do it that way. It wasn't protracted or anything, and I'm really glad that it came out well. That's one of these songs that like it was almost so straightforward that although I played it a bit with my band last fall when we were doing dates, I hadn't played it on any of these many solo dates I've been doing until sometime in June, just when I was out with Steve Gunn and Meg Baird. I started playing it finally, and I finally figured out how to play it, just because it is kind of a traditional song, and it's definitely a fun song to play, and people have been telling me that the chorus gets stuck in their head, so that's good, I guess.
You've got a pop song.
Yeah.
It's got to happen every now and then. Oh, cool. Thank you for this and the conversation. I know you're always up to a lot of other stuff. Do you have any more books planned or anything? I've always been a fan of those.
Yeah, I do. I actually just put out a little one on my own that I've been selling at gigs. It's called Some Writings on Music and Musicians, and it's just a little tiny like pocket book modeled after like those old City Lights press books, like Ginsberg's original Howl and stuff, really small size, fit in your back pocket of your jeans kind of thing. And it's a collection of different writings I've done over many years on like just like the title says, it's about music and musicians. There's a long piece about when I first came to New York and was experiencing Glenn Branca and Rhys Chatham and all that stuff, and a long piece about going to Morocco and hanging out with the master musicians of Jujuka. And then there's shorter pieces on, I don't know, everything from Kurt Cobain to Tony Conrad to Kim Gordon to to John Cage and Dylan and other stuff. And I want to collect stuff for a longer book like that, but I made like a very small version of it just to sell it at gigs. And there's a guy in Australia that's been working for a number of years on a kind of compendium of like stuff from all of my books plus more from the last like 20 or 25 years, and that's still in the works. I mean, there'll be more books for sure down the road. I love to write, and I've been putting more of that energy into songwriting these days, but I still definitely do that stuff and want to do more of it. The other thing I'm super excited about every aspect of this record, and the other aspect is the cover art, which is photographs by Richard Prince, who did the paintings on Sonic Youth's Nurse record, and is also an old friend from the very early days of Sonic Youth. I mean, not of Sonic Youth, but the early days of my moving to New York, like in the early 80s and stuff. And I couldn't be happier with the images that he provided for the album art, and I feel it just all really goes so well with the package. So, all the way around, this record just kind of clicked.
Yeah. Now, I've seen the one with the tire tracks and everything.
Yeah, that's the cover.
Yeah, that's a great picture.
There's like 5 more images of his that are, like gracing the inner and outer sleeve. So, yeah, it's really cool.
I can't wait to get the whole package then. And like I said, I'll have to end up at a show so I can grab one of those pocketbooks as well. So
yeah. I mean, that may get marketed at some point. Like I said, it'll probably get expanded before it gets published by someone else. But I I've been going to the local printer here and making 100 at a time and selling them.
Well, Lee, thank you so much. It was really great to talk to you and catch up with you again today. I look forward to the full release, and congratulations again. I love the record.
Okay, thanks. Now, you're in Louisville?
I'm in Louisville, yeah.
Okay. So I was there in January with Meg Baird and Steve Gunn. We played at Tim Barnes' place, Dreamland.
Here's the fun thing about that. So right above where you would have been playing was my apartment for about 2 years from 2012 to 2014. I lived right above Dreamland, yeah. So,
wow.
But yeah.
We were supposed to play in that cave.
Right.
And then they shut it down or something like that, like a few weeks before our tour, which was kind of disappointing. But it's a town that I love to go to, and I love to be in that part of the country. So hopefully I'll be able to get back there with my band when we start playing in the fall.
Yeah, you're always welcome, and I'll be sure to bug Mute about it too.
Yeah, please do.
All right, man. Take care out there.
All right, great talking to you.
You too. Bye.
Bye.